You wouldn't doubt a man of the gospel, would you?
Of course. That's the first man I doubt.
I'll be damned. Looks like I came to the right place after all.
Welcome to Lost and Found and Rewound, a podcast with three men who lived 2.1 miles away from each other for 8 straight years, but waited till they lived hundreds of miles from each other to become friends. I am Chris Lost.
I'm Found Jim.
And I'm Rick Rewound.
And on the topic of miles, I have a housekeeping item. On the last episode, I misstated the distances we live from one another. Rick lives 117 miles from Jim. I live 499 miles from Jim. And I live 381 miles from Rick. And I'm glad that I've cleared that up.
Triangulation.
I'm sorry to have gotten that wrong. So
I'm just thinking in terms of security, I don't put my birthday on Facebook. And so sometimes people wish me a happy birthday at the wrong time. And then there's a person who knows my birthday and sent me a message on Facebook saying, why are people wishing you a happy birthday? Do I have your birthday wrong? And I said, no, you have my birthday right, but there's no reason I'm going to go out on Facebook and correct my birth date publicly, because that's one more piece of data. If everyone thinks my birthday is this other day and Facebook thinks it's another day, and I don't tell Facebook, maybe that's one little tiny, thing I have to make myself more blurry to the data god.
yeah, but the truth is we're all screwed.
Oh, yeah, totally.
I mean, that doesn't help. I did take my birthday off Facebook because I didn't want all those I didn't want people to feel burdened by having to say happy birthday, and I didn't want to have to say thank you to all the people for saying happy birthday.
And it's not, it's not real. They know because Facebook reminded them. It's not because it's a special moment in their lives. It's some weird Facebook thing.
I put people's birthdays on my Outlook calendar, and then I make it a point to be reminded and wish them happy birthday on their birthdays.
Yeah, that's nice.
I think it's nicer than the Facebook reminder.
It is.
Today we're entering the third quarter and second half of our 12 film list.
Boy, man, you're big into the numbers all of a sudden.
And so far, we're still friends.
What's on the spreadsheet for today? How are the numbers looking?
They look good. I did some VLOOKUPs to check our numbers.
I think there are a lot of things that my students hate me for when I'm talking, but I think probably the one thing they hate most is when I go off on the spreadsheet lecture about how it's probably the most boring thing in the world, but if you want to do anything in the music business or anything, I said, I'm a teacher now and I use spreadsheets, and it's like, and they're just like, why am I here? Why am I paying for this? But it's like every student I say that to, and I've said it, there's one student who's a programmer, and I was like, you better accept it now. He's like, I don't want to work with Excel. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, either you start now or you might as well accept that it's going to be a part of your life for the rest of your life.
Do you not want to use a Phillips screwdriver? Too bad.
Exactly.
My daughter came home and we helped her do her budget, and I taught her spreadsheets. She's notoriously like me, and I was teaching her formulas and making different tabs for summing and stuff. And she was like, "This is cool. This is great. This is cool." And my wife was like, "Ooh."
Exactly, yeah.
But I was at a music video film festival. We were the featured band at a music video film festival, and we showed one of our videos, and they asked us, "What's the most important thing you can do to make an animated video," which is what we were showing.
Yeah.
And I said, this is going to sound really boring, folks, because I here I am, this guy in this rock band who just showed his cool animated video. I was like, you got to get your workflow straight. If you don't have your workflow straight, and the people were like, no, that's super interesting. What do you mean? And I told the story of how the animator was just a a beautiful animator, but was a disaster when it came to getting her AE files straightened out and all her like animation straightened out. So I actually had to spend weeks running through the nests of things that were all named the same thing and renesting them.
Yeah.
Because I had to fix her animation. She couldn't do it herself because she had gotten herself in such a mess.
Yeah.
So spreadsheets and workflows, kids.
Yeah.
So important.
So important, everyone. I know.
It is important.
So third podcast I'm going to start working on. It's either going to be cybersecurity or maybe just cybersecurity and spreadsheets. Just branch off to another.
Let's just do, the next podcast will all be on spreadsheets.
Right, exactly. Kind of first season movies, second season spreadsheet strategies. Different tasks.
Oh boy. My dad, who I vowed never to be like, used to build a chart, like, because, this is back before computers. Yeah. Well, not before computers, but before people had them.
Right.
And he'd build a chart to track the direction in which he mowed his lawn so he could mow it in a different direction every time. And
wow.
My mother would say, "You're just like your father, with those charts." And I was like, my mom's so crazy. I'll never be like my father. And then one day I was like building a database to calculate the surface area of my house so I could paint it. And my wife goes, that's kind of like building a chart to mow your lawn, isn't it? I was like, fuck, God damn it. Oh, well.
Yeah.
The films I've seen between this film and last film was only one film. I saw Halloween with my son, and boy, it does not hold up. It was.
That's too bad.
Rick had said this, maybe on a different podcast, not on our podcast, but you had said that there's certain things that are so troped that it completely ruins them, and that was the case of Halloween. That like my son was like watching it, and he was like, "Oh, that's like this meme," or "That's like," and it was like he was he was laughing through the whole film. I'm like, "What are you laughing about? I'd be scared shitless if I were your age watching this film." And he had just seen it all, every image, either scary or made fun of.
It's like a hyper version of Mad Magazine, right? So Mad Magazine is how I didn't see Clockwork Orange. I didn't see Apocalypse Now, probably. Like all these movies that I kind of knew what they were about, but it was through Mad Magazine, right? Now it's like an even more removed and dense thing where it's like, they're like memes and references and everything like that, but totally unhinged from the original source.
Like Warner Brothers cartoons when you're watching them in the 70s, and there are all these weird references from the 40s, like stars. Some of them are like obscure, but
like
Jimmy Durante. Jimmy Durante's
in them in real life, or like a movie.
20 years later, you go, that's what that Looney Tunes reference was.
Who Bugs Bunny was talking to.
Yeah.
Like, how would I ever know who Jimmy Durante was? It was through those cartoons.
He was in a car commercial in the 70s.
Right.
Oh, that's true.
What car was it? He's talked about his schnozola.
Cha-da-cha-da-cha. What films have you seen in the last
I'm thinking
7 days?
I don't think I've seen any. I know maybe I didn't talk about it, but I watched this documentary called Artifact in a classroom environment, which is directed by Bartholomew Cubbins, not his real name. It's about Jared Leto's band, 30 Seconds to Mars, and their struggles with EMI after their big hit record and making a new record. And it's Bartholomew Cubbins is Jared Leto's secret.
Pseudonym?
Pseudonym. And so it's a movie directed by him about the artistic struggles. But it's great because it's got Irving Azoff is their manager, and he's talking about how evil the music industry is and how evil these contracts are. And if you know anything about Irving Azoff, is like, he also ran record labels that had the exact same contracts and everything like that. And it was about to jump to Live Nation and run that for a while. So it was like it's such a strange movie, but it's a great, it's you have to watch a lot of Jared Leto being emotional and being a tortured artist. And you have to listen to the songs, but then you also get a lot of really insight into, the whole game that's played with the music industry when somebody has a hit record and then all of a sudden they realize that they're not making any money and then they have to renegotiate their contract. And at that time, it went to an extreme where EMI sued 30 Seconds to Mars, which is an unusual thing. Usually it's the artist sues the label and then the label just sits, basically delays them for 5 years, so it kills their careers. Right. And then the label wound up suing them back, so that was interesting.
Yeah, I started out in the music industry 27 years ago on my own path, not knowing anything and not being successful in it at all. But now, 27 years later, as I've learned all the horrible things that the music industry does, I'm like, I'm pretty proud of the way I did it. I never made any money, but people can't really call me an asshole. Well, they
Right.
call me an asshole, but they can't
Right.
say that I screwed him out of anything.
Yeah, the only thing they can blame you for, which is what typically happens if you do everything on the up and up, is they blame you for not being famous.
Right, not doing enough.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
exactly.
But then I've had enough examples of how that's not the case. I mean, it's just like, I mean, yes, I mean, I should have if I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're right.
And
The records would have been very popular.
Done morally ambiguous things, it probably would have done a lot better.
In the service of the record.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've certainly done morally ambiguous things. but they weren't to my credit, all to my discredit.
Exactly.
But that was a long time ago. The film we watched today.
Jim, did you watch anything?
Sorry,
no,
Jim.
No, I didn't.
I'm sorry,
It was
Jim.
only a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't believe.
Did you
I
see
did not see anything.
anything out the window that looked kind of neat?
No. Well, it snowed.
That's true.
Halloween. That was weird.
It was weird.
Today we watched The Ballad of Cable Hogue.
How do you spell that?
CableHogue.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about two smart brothers making fun of their dumb, undereducated friend,
What? Wait. That's your diary. You're reading your diary, not your notes.
leaving him in the wild.
Oh, are those guys brothers?
I don't know. I assume they were.
Really? Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Leaving them in the wild
I think you're projecting, man.
for 4 days without water. He finds water, friendship, love, guts, and forgiveness. And at the peak of his joy, he's killed by an automobile. The machine that was the subject of the city preacher's sermon earlier in the film. I'm not sure if you guys caught that.
I didn't.
But in truth, it was all a dream. He died of thirst on the third day when he was abandoned by the two brothers in the desert.
Is it true? That's your interpretation, huh?
That's my interpretation of the
Wow.
film.
That's pretty deep. So what, that scene, they just didn't have time to shoot that last scene where you see him desiccated in the middle of the desert?
Well, at one point, Stella Stevens says, "You'd leave your desert, Hogue?" And
Wow.
And he said, "Hell, I've already gone."
Wow.
When she
That's
comes
pretty
back for
deep.
him.
Yeah.
And then the end scene, when he's lying in bed dying with all his friends around him, struck me as an ode to the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
And in the Wizard of Oz, if you'll remember, it was all a dream. Anyway, that's a theory that he doesn't really truly live
Yeah. I could,
through
now
the
that
points
I
of
can
the
see
film.
that now. Yeah, I don't know.
What did you guys think of the film today?
I've got to rethink it all, since now it's just some kind of Dallas season 3 kind of flashback thing, right? What season of Dallas was that?
I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I don't know the number, oddly enough. But I know it was Bobby Ewing who came back to life. I think it was Bobby Ewing.
Actually, it was in 1986, and I know that because I was at a trivia night over the weekend, and the question is what year? I believe that seems really late, though, doesn't it? 1986 seems really late for Bobby Ewing to be coming back, that all being a dream. So now I'm starting to wonder if I'm confusing two trivia questions. Continue.
It could be. What were your thoughts of this film? I hadn't seen it in the longest time. I will say that halfway through the film, I was feeling a little about it. Because I hadn't seen it since I was in my very early 20s, when my perspective on things probably wasn't as progressive. And it did get a little pervy at the middle of the film. And I was watching the scene where they kept flashing back to Stella Stevens' cleavage, and I'm like, is this what people mean by the male gaze being in films?
I think it's, the male gaze made very literal, right?
I mean, it
Like
couldn't.
extreme.
Yeah. But then as it progressed and got to the ending, I realized why I love the film so much. What were your thoughts? And you guys are happy. I don't care if you guys hated it. I'm fine to hear that.
What I found fascinating was, I'm pretty sure Stella Stevens was not wearing makeup in the film. And this seems like a totally superficial thing, but I don't think I've ever seen her in a non kind of glamorous, but even any actress, even actresses that are playing women out west, having that strange, washed out, no makeup look. That's the thing I noticed the most about it. And so in some ways, that really got me for some reason, like that kind of choice, her making that choice or someone making that choice and her going along with it. I thought was pretty profound, and I don't think I've seen that in lots of other films. I've seen actresses and actors look natural, right? But that there's an unnatural, natural look to that. This literally looked like she was not wearing makeup.
Yeah, there's a way to do makeup to make it look like you're not wearing makeup, and that's not what was happening here.
And
she was not wearing makeup.
That really, for some reason, really got me. Like, even films now, You don't see that.
No. Even if somebody's like supposed to have been trapped in a room for a month.
Exactly.
They're wearing makeup.
They're wearing the makeup of looking trapped in a room, not what it looks like when you're under, lighting or in the sunlight without makeup, right? Which is more washed out.
I also noticed she was a pretty young woman in this, but she was wrinkled around her. She would wrinkle, her face would wrinkle when she would smile.
Yeah, all that stuff.
And I
really
thought,
fascinating.
And I thought, boy, she looks beautiful. I kind of like that. I mean, I think it was refreshing that, she was kind of all out there.
Yeah.
That's kind of her character, though, right? She was a prostitute. I don't know if we can say that. I mean, that was she was an old West call girl or whatever.
No, I think you would call it a prostitute in those days, in the parlance of their times.
Well, I was reading IMDb and they had her described as a sex worker. It just struck me as funny. I was like, should we modernize this term from this film? But I thought she was proud of who she was. He didn't care that she was a prostitute. He said she was a human being at one point, which... there's a lot about redemption and forgiveness and actually empathy and the human struggle in this film that I really liked. I thought was there on screen on purpose, and I dug it. No? Yes?
I'm going to let Jim say something.
Yeah, I know. It's definitely an unusual Sam Peckinpah movie. I never saw it before. And there's almost very little violence. And it like you said at the beginning, you were like worried, like you hadn't seen it in a while. And you're like, uh-oh. It is kind of, there's parts of it that are very like corny and kind of like weird film tricks, like fast speed, like
the Benny Hill running.
Yeah, Benny Hill thing. Like there's a bunch of that. And then he looks at the dollar bill with the chief, the head, kind of winks at him, it's like this
googly
weird
eyes,
it's like you could say he's like kind of hallucinating or whatever, but he's not, he's not out in the desert, he's just in the town, and it just makes this weird cartoonish, like the dollar bill is winking back at him, and that was really strange. They're like, those don't kind of take you out of the movie, or they're just gimmicky, jokey, cartoonish things, but all the stuff you were talking about is there's a lot more to this movie than that. It's not a typical Western at all. Yeah, it's more about these very kind of human characters. It's not really a cartoon Western.
And it's before McCabe and Mrs. Miller, right? So I'm thinking of McCabe and Mrs. Miller has that weird, right? That's the one with Julie Christie and Warren Beatty. Is that right? Yeah. Right? I feel like that, and that's got the Leonard Cohen songs in it, and it's got the strange, it's more character study, right? Western. Mm-hmm. And so thinking about that in terms of the timeline, because when you started describing it, I'm like, oh, that's what everybody said was revolutionary about McCabe and Mrs. Miller, right? Or that era of new Western kind of stuff. But then you see the possibility that Sam Peckinpah was kind of working on those ideas, even the musical ideas, and it didn't quite all come together, I feel like, right? It's like an experimental film, and what you're talking about, it's kind of like his experimental film, because there's also the split screen stuff. It's like he's kind of experimenting with things here. Yeah. Whereas The Wild Bunch, the year before, it's got the pushing the boundaries of violence, so beyond the Bonnie and Clyde, going farther than that went. It's kind of like, I feel like, Bonnie and Clyde opened the gates, and then he was like, I can go even farther with this, right? And does that in The Wild Bunch. I'll have to watch The Wild Bunch, and I've watched it. Yeah, this was the first time I saw this movie, Cable Hogue, but Wild Bunch I've seen a lot, but I haven't watched it recently. But I think it's pretty traditional in terms of...
It's a straight Western.
Straight, yeah.
I took my son to see it at the Alamo Drafthouse just this year because it was the 50th anniversary of its release, and it was premiered in the building that our Alamo Drafthouse currently resides in. So it was in the same theater, which we didn't know. And I was worried about Thomas. He's a young kid, and I hated Westerns when I was a kid, so I dragged my son to a Western, I'm sure. And he loved it. In fact, I mentioned it the other day. He's like, "Oh yeah, I remember that film. That was a great film," and it is a great film.
But it is experimental, or kind of pushes the boundaries with the use of slow motion and kind of the way it's. Yeah, that's all of the kind of Peckinpah things.
That's the only technical trick,
right?
Is the slow motion, but the rest of it is.
That was a pretty
Western.
Big thing, I think, at the time, right? And I'm now I'm trying to remember my Peckinpah films, but I feel like that was when he started really playing around with that. So this is in some ways kind of an extension where it's like, oh, he's playing around. Well, it's like, oh yeah, you do slow motion one movie, you do undercranking, you speed up stuff in the other movie, right? It's like obvious he's hidden some kind of era where he was experimenting. And so that's what's interesting to me about it, is seeing it playing around with the form. It's also, you think about the Wild Bunch, and it has the characters and everything like that, but this is the violence, I guess, of the Wild Bunch is the part that everybody loves, right? Or I don't know if they love, but it like keeps the motor running, right? The character stuff is
the action, arguably the action. The violence, I think people didn't realize that violence was a mechanism used to make action more intense.
Yeah.
I like to think of it that way, that it wasn't I don't like the violence. I like how it sort of depicts action. It makes the action more real.
And it's that idea that, oh, you can have an action film, but then you can have characters and everything like that. Whereas this is more of a character film, and there's action, but it's not the engine.
Although I thought this film had less death in it. I forgot about the two people that he kills in it. I thought that he was the only person that died in it, which is interesting because this film sat between The Wild Bunch and Straw Dogs, two very sort of vindictive and violent films. And this one was sort of his sort of peaceful. It was kind of like a poem, in between, sandwiched in between two very violent and.
It's his conversation.
It is. Yeah,
the
it is.
Conversation is violent though and bloody though, but it's like those in between kind of movies that directors sometimes make that are more poetic, or if they've had some success. Although that's I don't think that was Peckinpah's case, right? It's kind of like this is the movie that kind of threw everything off, went over budget, and kind of ruined his momentum.
I think so. I think this is when his people just started not to get what he was trying to do, because Straw Dogs was next, and it was very. I don't know if it made a lot of money. I think it did, maybe because of Dustin Hoffman. I know this film cost. It was a success, sort of. I mean, it made back its money. So it cost $3.7 million to make. It made $5 million. It won the Cinema Writers Circle Award in Spain for Best Foreign Film. It's the only award it won in Spain. It won Best Foreign Film when it was released 2 years later. Not very well. I guess it was pretty well received. Critics, 93% on Rotten Tomato. It was one of his best reviewed films, along with Ride the High Country, which was a 93, Major Dundee, which is 97.
What?
Yeah, I've never seen that film.
Major Dundee, 97.
At 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Major Dundee. Okay, I'm thinking of Crocodile Dundee. Okay. No. I got in 1997. I got super confused all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, and then The Wild Bunch also was 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. So a pretty well critically reviewed film, but didn't make a ton of money. Not as much as Wild Bunch.
Speaking of perviness and everything like that, I mean, is this the movie that kind of basically established David Warner as a creep? I feel like it is.
Who is David Warner?
David Warner's the British
priest.
actor.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought he was great.
Oh, he's an amazing actor.
But the whole scene with him
with the widow
attacking the
woman,
basically. Or
one of the scenes that made you uncomfortable about, is this the movie I thought it was?
Yeah, when he locks the door on her and then creeps her, although she seems okay with everything that was going on.
She's trusting because he's a priest, which he's obviously not, because he's wearing black leather gloves, right? So that's like, if David Warner wasn't creepy enough, it's like, how maybe people won't understand that he's not really a priest, or there's something going on. Let's have him wear black leather gloves too. Oh, okay. But now we know you're a creepy priest.
He had the motorcycle gloves before he got the motorcycle.
Motorcycle, yeah.
No, those were different. Those were even bigger gloves. He got bigger.
Yeah.
Oh, did he?
After,
He had
like
those big gloves
gauntlets.
on.
Yeah.
That was interesting. And he had a sidecar on his motorcycle. The second time through this film, this is the second time I've seen it, I was starting to look for all the metaphors. I was like, this is an allegory for his death. He died in the desert. And what's the sidecar mean in the motorcycle? Because it's a black motorcycle with a sidecar, but it's, it was probably just because he couldn't ride a motorcycle in the desert, so they had to have something hold him up. But I really started trying to look for symbols, and there was a black chauffeur
Yeah.
Stella Stevens had a black chauffeur
Yeah.
in that beautiful sort of chitty chitty bang bang kind of car that she had.
David Warner, he just is so good at being evil that he just kind of got trapped. And I'm just curious. I'm going to have to go look and see if this is when it happened. This movie just kind of locked him in stone. He came to Hollywood. This is probably when he came to Hollywood, and it was like he's in this movie, and it's like, you're a bad guy. That's it.
I don't know if he was. I mean, I see that, right? I see how he was a creep, but I think the point of his character was that people were flawed. You know, I think it's just like, he was just he was a victim to his own will. Like he had no tact or anything. Because I mean, I was trying to figure out what the relationship was between Cable, Hogue, and him, because like I thought they were friends, but they weren't really friends. Like they would drink together, and he did take care of his land when Cable went to go out and claim it.
And he kind of disappeared half of the move back, like the last half.
To go have sex with the married woman.
It seemed like it was weeks he was gone, or I don't
Right.
know. It's like,
Yeah.
That's the
he showed
thing.
up again.
The timeline of this movie, I'm a little upset about the timeline, right? So, like, where it's 3 years, the movie's 3 years, and then Stella Stevens was at his house for 3 weeks.
Right.
I feel like it should have been longer. I feel like she should have been there for a year. The whole story should have taken place over 5 or 6 or 10 years.
I didn't catch that it was 3 years at all. I didn't know it was that long.
It's like the guys, he said, like the guy's route, he's been waiting 3 years for this guy to come back and kill him or
Right,
something, you know, and then it's just like, 3 years? Come on.
Yeah, it was odd. I mean, it plays more into my my theory that it was all these goofy things, like the speed running, the dollar winking at him, all these sort of surreal. The fact that the Western building didn't track, which was annoying me, and then annoyed Rick. Our OCD was going off as we're trying to figure out, well, if he goes in that door, and then it just didn't make any sense.
Sketch out the floor plan.
Yeah,
while
gotta
you're
do
watching
that.
the movie.
None of it made
Got to
sense.
chart the saloon.
This is I've watched a lot of Peckinpah documentaries because I'm pretty fascinated with him. I really like the way, in this film, I think sort of characterizes it the best. I just like the way you said it, Jim, is a very human film. I think I like the way that he characterizes people, and he just sort of says, you know, this is the way some people are, right? And I kind of like that view. But in these documentaries I've watched, there's 2 films where they've said that the main actor was essentially playing Peckinpah, was basically acting exactly like Peckinpah, and Peckinpah didn't notice. So the rest of everybody else, because he made a lot of films with a lot of people that he was friends with. So, and a lot of these actors were in a lot of his different films, but they were like, oh, wow, he's just playing Sam. Does Sam get it? And it was this film and Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, Warren Oates.
Yeah.
Was basically just acting like Peckinpah. And so those 2 characters are fairly similar. They're very capable losers. In some way, they sort of make things work for themselves.
It's like the Woody Allen effect. Anytime Woody Allen hires an actor to play a 70 or 80-year-old man can't play a 30-year-old, right? Then that actor winds up playing Woody Allen, right? Does a very bad Woody Allen imitation, kind of. It's like when you have a director that's so powerful of a character themselves, right? It's almost like the actor can't help but become, absorb the director. And the director is going to reinforce it because the director, without knowing, is like, oh, yeah, I like that.
Right.
It's like, oh, I like that person. That's me. And they don't even know it's them, right?
Here, the difference being that Edward Norton probably didn't hang out with Woody Allen for 10 years prior to making Everybody Says I Love You.
But in theory, he probably did, virtually like watching all the films, right, beforehand.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. It's a really good point. Directors are narcissists. I think that's the summation of that point there.
Kansas City. Food-wise, a city famous for its barbecue. But that's about to change. My name is W. Dave Keith, host of the podcast Taco the Town, and I believe that Kansas City is one of the most underrated, underappreciated, up-and-coming taco towns in the USA. On Taco the Town, we will shine a light on all the amazing tacos Kansas City has to offer. Kansas City is a great taco town filled with a variety of untapped taco stylings and flavors, and on the Taco the Town podcast, we won't stop until we've tasted every taco in the town. No taco table will go unturned. Each episode, we review a new taco joint with a special guest. We share taco memories, discuss taco topics, and put tacos to the test. We check the latest stories in taco news, and no taco is off the table on Taco the Town. If you love tacos, like I do, you're gonna love Taco the Town. Available on iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, and Google Play. That's Taco the Town.
Jim, any thoughts? What did this film evoke in you?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, you're talking about music here. That was another kind of odd thing about it, was the weird folk kind of music didn't really mesh with me. It was kind of just distracting. I found it, or was strange. There was even a duet, like
Butterfly Weekends or whatever. What was it?
Mornings, Butterfly Mornings.
Yeah, that's right.
Like Jason Robards and Stella Stevens sing together. It was became a musical in the middle. That was a little weird, but it was fine. But the music was just strange, like a West. It's obviously, it's not a typical Western. So I guess it's better not just having cliche kind of Western music, whatever that is, But it was kind of like, when did Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid come out? Was that after this?
It would have been right before it, I think. 69.
So
Butch
that kind of
Cassidy and Sundance Kid was 69 also,
pretty
right?
close to it.
Raindrops keep
Oh,
falling.
right.
That
That became
those
a
weird
thing.
modern musical interludes in a 1800s movie, and this wasn't quite that weird, but it was just the weird kind of folky music sounded strange to me in a late 1800s Western America. It was
It sounded hippie.
it
to me,
was
like a
very
little hippie.
it was
a little
almost
dreamy.
almost Wicker Man like too. Some parts of it.
That's
Exactly.
true. That is true.
It was fine. But
Full circle.
strange.
There was a dialogue convention. I don't know if Rick, maybe you know what this is called, where two people are having a conversation, and it's a cohesive conversation, of 3 minutes of dialogue, but they do it over several different scenes,
right,
even jumping in time. So it'd be like, how was your day? And we're standing in a living room. Then the next thing is, it was a great day, but we're out in the garage and you're fixing the car. And then it's like, well, what did you have for lunch? And then that's where we're staying on top of a skyscraper. There's there's that that convention I noticed was used in The President's Analyst, and I was going to point it out.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're right.
And it was also used in the film many times, the film Beach Bum, which is the most recent Harmony Korine film, which is actually fantastic.
Yeah, I still haven't watched that.
Those scenes were done really well, and he did them intentionally. And in his film, it was like they'd literally be on a jet ski, then cut to them having orange juice or something, just the most bizarre jumps in time and situation. But it's that conversation is almost structured so that it's intentional.
Yeah.
And it is the same thread. So I don't know if that's called anything. Or
It's got to be, or at least who originated that idea, right? Where you start messing with time like that, where you have, it kind of goes back to that experimental thing. It's like, I'm gonna experiment a bit. I'm gonna try. Oh, that's a cool thing. I'm gonna try that out.
That happened in this movie?
It did.
They were built when they were building.
Right. Yeah.
Oh,
because they'd be in their long johns, and then they'd be dressed again, and then they'd be back in their long johns, or the house would be a little further along.
Oh, yeah,
but it was all the same conversation.
Right.
And again, it's like a hint at this is all a dream.
Yeah.
I have to go back to Jacob's Ladder. I need to watch Jacob's Ladder and look for if they did that in Jacob's Ladder as a trick to.
But I'm reminded of the Dr. Strangelove quote is the whole point of this, though, is to tell them that you have it. It's like if it's going to be a dream, and that's the whole idea, then at some point you've got to actually make that apparent. It doesn't work as a dream if you don't actually
It's art, Rick.
I know,
Are
it's
you
art,
saying that
exactly.
there are rules to art?
I'm just saying it's kind of that idea though. It's
That end funeral was so poetic, though.
Yeah.
And it was so beautiful and so strange. Like,
Right.
and
like,
his whole
like
death.
Where did, like when in time did this happen? Like there. Yeah, it is all very, because he's like having his fake funeral. He's still alive and they're all around him, like you said. And then all of it jumps to like, where did they get all their funeral clothes? Like, yeah, Stella Stevens is just on a car driving to New Orleans and, she just happens to have her funeral.
Well, her husband died the week earlier.
I guess so she'd have it in her trunk.
Or she
So
drove
that's
into
possible.
town.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, it could just be that they're not that far from the town. So
That
they
convention,
just came
though,
back.
is used in his the funeral speech. Because remember, the funeral
Right. Oh,
speech
okay.
starts
Yeah.
at the bed, and then they
Yeah.
jump to the actual funeral
Right.
itself,
Yeah.
which is
Yes.
actually, I thought, a pretty hard-hitting
yeah. No, it was
moment.
Yeah.
And I was glad to see, because I was a little worried. It's like, oh boy, these guys are going to, I don't know why I recommended this film, but I was glad that scene where he gets killed by the car hit you. It seemed like it hit you kind of hard, because it hit me hard when I watched it, where you just like, know this can't happen from.
Well, it just made me sad.
Right.
And also it seems like a little bit of a overwrought metaphor.
Yeah, you're getting hit
Right.
in the face
The
with it.
future, he's literally
Run
being
over.
run over by a car, which is the Old West is dying. And the automobile represents progress.
And that's what
and then
most
he gets
people
killed
think
by
is.
it.
Yeah, most people think that that's what the film is about. It's about the transition from the Old West to the New West, which is what Butch Kansas City and the Sundance Kid was
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, and maybe it represents the loss of the 60s too, right? It's that I mean, maybe that's what the greater metaphor is for all those films, right? It's like, this magical time, what we believed was this magical time, but it wasn't, and then it's gone away, or
Like MacArthur Park.
yeah, like somebody left the cake out in the rain,
Is that what that song's about?
right?
Well, and it could also be Peckinpah worrying about his career. He was transitioning. He went from The Wild Bunch to this film to Straw Dog. So he went from a Western to a film that there was no Western aspects to Straw Dogs.
Right.
It was a guy driving around in a modern day, and so maybe it was the transition of him sort of killing
Oh yeah,
the Western version of Peckinpah and moving into the Peckinpah that has his heroes ride in on a car, which is how I think Straw Dog starts, as they drive up. But I don't know. That's probably reading too much.
no, I don't think because I think that was kind of like a funeral for the Western.
It died for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should this film be lost?
No.
Does it have something to say, or is it just another film in a cadre of 60s
it's,
films?
It's really unusual for him, like within Sam Peckinpah's work. It's like it's definitely, that's what I found most interesting. How it's really seemed unlike most of movies I've seen by him. So that by itself is interesting. And there's stuff, like I said, I didn't like or took me out of it, like the music and all the weird fast speed Benny Hill stuff, But other than that, there's plenty there that it's an interesting movie. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite films of his, and I saw it after I had seen almost all of his films. I had yet to see Convoy and was it the Igers or Osterman Weekend. I hadn't seen all sort of the latter era films, but I'd seen most of all the ones. Even I'd seen Cross of Iron and all that stuff. So all the macho stuff, and then to see this, I was like, oh, this is. It seemed like he's like, well, I'm not all bullets and macho, although there was a lot of male stuff in there in this film, a lot of bromance or whatnot. But should this film be found, would you recommend this film to a coworker? I, watching it in the middle of the film, decided that the answer was no. I was in the middle of the film. I was worried about recommending it for this podcast. Would you recommend it to someone at the grocery store, Jim? Or a young child?
pulling it off the DVD rack at the convenience store at the truck stop. This is the movie you should see, young man. It features a young Stella Stevens. Got a little too Adam Sandler there.
Pretty as a picture she is in this film. Her bosom, supple bosom.
I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of this whole part with David Warner is really creepy and weird, and it's a strange. Some parts of it are strange, but it's I don't know if I would really recommend it to anybody. I don't know.
If somebody says to you,
Not a stranger, I wouldn't recommend it. I don't know.
just anyone.
You couldn't. I mean,
No.
I have I said, have you ever seen Ballad of Hogue? Thinking it was this endearing, sort of peaceful film. And should this film be rewound? Would you watch it again?
I gotta break down that saloon set and the exterior of the saloon set. So yeah, I'm gonna have to watch it again.
Get a spreadsheet.
Yep.
Calculate the distance.
Get my charts going. Do the
Graph-
3D rendering.
Graph paper.
Yeah. Map it out. Get little tiny cameras and try to place like little cardboard and try to figure out where all the shots are happening.
It doesn't work. It won't work. I mean, just the whole.
I definitely have to watch it again at some point. Well, I have to write down what you said. The whole thing about it being him dying 3 days right at the beginning, and that's very interesting. So yeah, I definitely have to watch it again at some point for that.
Because he was 4 days in the desert. And
Yeah.
we were saying before we started the podcast that you can only survive for 3 days, without water.
Yeah.
Well, that's just a rough,
Yeah, he was hardy.
Yeah, he was a extra special
That's true. He had a conversation
grizzly
with God.
prospector. He could have survived. And it had Slim Pickens in it too. That's
It did.
It's always nice to see him. And Strother Martin,
Yeah.
who I referenced just yesterday in a conversation with a young person because they were talking about the Kevin Smith film Tusk, which apparently is somebody being turned into a walrus or something, right? And I said, well, there's this movie I saw when I was a kid called SSSS, right? Snake Sound. And I was like, yeah, it had this guy, the guy from Cool Hand Luke, Strother Martin. And so Strother Martin, who plays one of the brothers that, apparently brothers, I did not understand that. I thought they were just two
I don't
vagrants.
know. I don't know if they were brothers.
Yeah. And
You just thought they were vagrants.
yeah. Fellow vagrants, they weren't related, where he turns, I think it's Dirk Benedict into a snake. Strother Martin's a crazy scientist, and he starts injecting Dirk Benedict with...
Was Strother Martin the thin one?
No, the guy who talks
one that
like
lived.
this.
Oh, okay.
We have a failure to communicate. That guy.
Oh.
Found and I were on a tour once in a bus, and there were like 20 videotapes on the bus, right? And we sat there the whole trip, right, trying to connect the movies all together, actors and everything like that. And I remember that being. Do you remember this kind of exercise we did with that?
Yeah.
That and then
There were three bands
yeah.
on this bus touring Europe, and so we had just a box of videotapes.
And we were able to link all the movies together, and then like a year
Yeah.
later,
What do you mean link them together? Like find
this actor
6
was in
degrees
this,
of separation?
and everything like that, and then
It was before that was a thing.
And that's what I'm saying. And it was like
Kind of.
this amazing bonding experience. And then like a year later, the Internet Movie Database came about, and like I would tell stories about, this was really amazing, like how we all used our knowledge of trivia and movies and everything like that, and weave together this complex network to connect all these films together. And then it was like, and then the Internet happened, and then it was like, okay, there's that.
Does it all
It just ruins it.
That
It
joyful sort
ruins
of
every argument.
social film connections thing is no longer important because now you can just look it up online. So that thing you loved ruined something for me. So thanks a lot for bringing that up, Chris. Thanks for
I'm
really
sorry I
putting
brought
me
up
down.
the internet because you had forgotten all about it. It's not like you were talking about the internet at all before we
It's
started
not like
this
I
podcast.
spent half of this movie on the Internet Movie Database doing all those connections. Like, oh, that's right. Stella Stevens was in this movie. She was also in Poseidon Adventure.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, what did that remind me of? The Poseidon Adventure. There was one last
Sorry.
thing. Oh, the Nutty Professor.
Oh, yeah,
too.
yeah.
Stella Stevens.
Yeah. That's great.
The original Nutty Professor, Chris, not the one you've seen.
I haven't seen either, but I'll watch the new one first. Is Eddie Murphy the new Nutty Professor?
I think so. There might be even another one by now, right?
Right. With wasn't there an Incredible Mr. Limpet? Didn't they do a new one of those?
Oh,
with like
maybe. I
Jim
don't know.
Carrey or something.
Maybe.
I think so. But do we think as we now have crossed the halfway point, there are things that tie all these films together?
It's Nickelodeon by Peter Bogdanovich.
You think that's the
Burt Reynolds, Stella Stevens, William Fraker, the cinematographer.
I was going to ask
Did
that
he shoot-
cinematographer.
No,
Was
he did not
oh.
shoot Nickelodeon. No, he shot Sharky's Machine, though.
Are we picking
Both The President's Analyst and Sharky's Machine was shot by William Fraker.
right? And that's a film that I picked and you picked, right? So
Yeah, not intentional.
are we picking a certain genre of film?
This is Gen X white dudes film school.
We were going to pick things that we rented from video
Yeah,
stores.
that's
so
true.
yeah,
So
I
they're all
definitely
kinda
didn't
hitting
pick
on
any
the same
yeah,
actors.
Yeah. So, I just things that were out, in the 80s, but they're not necessarily from the same era, but just not definitely not newer movies.
But it was kind of the first time. Well, I guess you could discover, unseen films, on television. Like the afternoon movie, the 3:30 movie, as it was called in the Chicago area, right, or late night movies, where you'd see these films. But yeah, with VHS, that was the first time where kind of films could have a second life beyond the theater. First run. Well, that's not true though. Television could do that too, and so yeah. But that was kind of like our. So I think like a slightly older generation, like the reason why they love 30s horror movies, right, is because they'd see those on TV, right. Whereas this is our generation. It's more about the discovering stuff on VHS.
So do our kids have an equivalent of this? Because like we were digging through video stores to have an experience that we couldn't find anywhere else, where now our kids can pretty much find anything they would want.
I have an answer for you, but you're not going to like it.
Okay.
So, since I'm teaching a video class with some 18 to 22-year-olds, some slightly older, but what's happening, I think, is...
Pornhub? Is that what you're about to say?
No, YouTube nostalgia. So there's like a lot of new YouTubers who are making videos that look like they're from 2007. And
oh my God.
These kids love them because it's like, oh yeah, it's like it looks like what the kind of video somebody would make in their room, with bad green screen or no green screen and all that kind of stuff. And it's like I'm watching these videos that they're showing, and it's I'm thinking, oh, this is like a 2008 YouTube video, and it's like 2019, 2018, right? And it's nostalgia, but the nostalgia is so tight right now. So it's like seeing nostalgia for things that are less than 10 years old, and also kind of stylistic things and quality things, right? That represents. So in the same way that somebody who is a Gen X filmmaker, right, would reference 70s filmmaking, right? This is somebody referencing the kind of look and feel of YouTube videos from 10 years ago.
It's like Tim and Eric doing a star wipe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I referenced Tim and Eric, not to them, but to somebody else like of our age. And it was like, yeah, it's like the Tim and Eric thing, but it's a much shorter time span, it feels like.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well.
Sorry to be the messenger for you there.
Sorry. I mean, it explains a lot of my
kids these days.
I just do still hold to 98% of the films that I take my son to see on the big screen at Alamo. He loves. He's just absolutely enraptured with. And The Wild Bunch, I just thought it was awesome. So these kids are not, without the ability to appreciate things. It's just that they...
I just have to find the Onion article, right? That's the great my favorite Onion article, which is like, it has the picture of the father handing the daughter a copy of Remain in Light and saying, father, something like destroys child's hope for, integrating with their generation or something like that, right? It's basically
Right, yeah.
like this parent,
like chance for
indoctrinate
popularity.
Indoctrinating their child into their cultural touchstones, right? So basically making their child into an outcast, right? Because it's like, oh, you should listen to Talking Heads, and you should watch these Sam Peckinpah movies, right? Which is
It is funny that he and his friends though have discovered Pink Floyd, and they're sitting around listening to Pink Floyd, and they're like, "You listen to Pink Floyd?" I'm like, Pink Floyd guys, Pink Floyd. I mean, they thought they had really come across something, and then I showed them the picture of me emulating the "Wish You Were Here" album cover on the Warner Brothers lot, and I'm like, guys, this was taken, in 2003. They're just like, what? Because they thought they had introduced me to Pink Floyd.
Exactly. You got to check out this band, man. Pink Floyd.
Did they
hear of him?
What about like early Pink, like Syd Barrett? Did they like Syd Barrett? Pink
No,
Floyd?
they're like into "Wish You Were Here."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not cool, man. Like the lady said to the sailor, I think we're done here.
Wait, that's not what the lady says to the sailor?
He says two different things, I think, in the movie.
Oh, is it?
I think he does.
Strange,
Okay, we'll go with that. Because there's also, depends on how you look at it, I think was the other.
Yeah.
Lost and Found and Rewound is fully funded by Lost and Found and Rewound Foundation funds. Lost and Found and Rewound does not use crowdfunding because our listeners have better things to do with their funding. There's no need to post reviews of Lost and Found and Rewound because our listeners have more valuable things to do with their time. In all sincerity, thank you for listening to the show. We truly appreciate it.
Lotus Pod.